Right, good to see you all. First, let's start by singing. Let's see how good your singing is.
God can do anything, anything at all. God can do anything, anything at all. Nothing is too big for him and nothing is too small. God can do anything, anything at all. Don't put him in a box, don't shove him in a corner. Don't you limit what he can do. Don't put him in a box, don't shove him in a corner. Don't you limit what he can do. God can do anything, anything at all. God can do anything, anything at all. Nothing is too big for him and nothing is too small. God can do anything, anything at all. Don't put him in a box, don't shove him in a corner. Don't you limit what he can do. Don't put him in a box, don't shove him in a corner. Don't you limit what he can do. God can do anything, anything at all. God can do anything, anything at all. Nothing is too big for him and nothing is too small. God can do anything, anything at all. Don't put him in a box, don't shove him in a corner. Don't you limit what he can do. Don't put him in a box, don't shove him in a corner. Don't you limit what he can do. God can do anything, anything at all. God can do anything, anything at all. Nothing is too big for him and nothing is too small. God can do anything, anything at all. Don't put him in a box, don't shove him in a corner. Don't you limit what he can do. Don't put him in a box, don't shove him in a corner. Don't you limit what he can do. Yeah, yeah.
Good. In all our stories so far, we've been thinking about what God can do. God can do anything. The Bible tells us God can do anything. The Bible tells us that what is impossible for mankind like you and me, is possible with God. That's how good and big and great God is. Right, okay, throw your phones away. Good. Okay, here we go. Oh, apparently there's a nice fast one in this, right? Is it fastest? Fastest? I don't think you can do fastest. You've never done fastest. Have you done faster? Right. I'll choose. The grand old book is called the what? Yes, the Bible. How many parts does the Bible have? Who knows what they're called? Isaac? How many books in total are in the Bible? 66 is right. Well done, 66. Right, who thinks they know all the books in the Bible? Right, all together then. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, Titus, Philemon, Hebrews, James, 1 Peter, 2 Peter, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, Jude. Well done. Kind of reminds me, anyway, of Christmas. Okay, what's next? It is the memory verse. Right, the first one all together then, for the last time. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 6. Good.
See, I can search, but I will find.
So, we're going to speak some more about Ruth and Naomi. So there she is, there's Ruth, she's back in the same country where Naomi was, not her own country, in Naomi's own country. And it was a strange country to her, but she said she would go back with Ruth. She said she would go back with Naomi. And so, they had no husbands, and so they had to fend for themselves. They had to go and find food for themselves. They had to go and make sure they had enough to eat. And so Ruth here, you can kind of see she's in, what does that look like? A field of corn or wheat. And there she is with her basket, and she's picking up behind the people who are actually doing the proper picking. So in that day, there was a law that people who were poorer could go along and pick up the bits that were left. So they weren't in taking all the field. The actual people that the farmer had employed or whoever owned the land had employed were in, and they were taking all the good stuff and they were putting it away and they were taking it away. And Ruth was going behind and picking up the little bits that were left so that her and Naomi would be able to eat and would be able to live. And so, while this was going on, she was working away, keeping herself to herself, maybe keeping a safe distance, because it was a strange land, it was a strange country, and there she was working away. But the man who owned the field, his name was Boaz. See if you can remember that. If you manage to remember Elimelech, you can remember Boaz. Now, it was Boaz's field, and he noticed that Ruth was working away and picking up the bits and pieces of corn, and he asked who she was. Now, in that country, in that time, everybody knew that Naomi had come home, and they obviously knew the sad story behind the fact that Elimelech had died, and Naomi and Oprah's husbands had died too, and that's why Naomi was back, and they maybe wondered who had come back with her. And so the people knew that Ruth had come back with Naomi, and when Boaz asked, who's the girl in the field, who's the lady in the field picking up the bits and pieces of corn, they said, well, it's Ruth. And so her kindness and Ruth's kindness and devotion to Naomi, because she could have went back home. When Naomi said, you two girls go back home, I've got no more sons to give you husbands, you two can go back home. Oprah did go back home, but Ruth committed herself to Naomi and followed her and trusted in God in the whole thing. And so we're going to start seeing how God's hand was in it all. And so Boaz inquired of who this girl, who this lady in the field was, and found out that it was Ruth. And well, he knew that Ruth had been so kind to Naomi and had come back with her and was basically committing herself to Naomi. And he said to his workers, tell you what, when you're working along, just leave a little bit extra as you go. Just drop a bit more, just leave a wee bit extra so that she can pick up and so that she'll have plenty. And so that's what they did. And Ruth went home, and I don't know how long this had gone on for, that Ruth had come back with a little bit, enough obviously to feed her and Naomi, and she came back with a little bit until this day, or maybe even more than one day, she came back with quite a bit more. And she asked whose field she was working in, and she thought it was Boaz's, and she was amazed at how she was bringing more back and how that Boaz had been kind to her. And so Naomi said to Ruth, well, I tell you what to do. You go, and it's a custom in that country, if a woman wants to make herself, would like to show herself as a potential bride, as a potential wife for another man, then it's maybe quite a strange thing. I don't know, my wife's never done it to me. She's never done this. But, well, Naomi said to Ruth, when Boaz is sleeping, what I want you to do is, and it's custom in that day, is to go and lie at his feet. And his cover or his garment that he's got on, just pull that over you and lie at his feet. It's maybe a bit strange. If you fell asleep, if you're a grown man and you fell asleep, and then all of a sudden it tells us that it was about midnight, you wake up and, whoa, there's a woman lying at your feet. Well, that's what Naomi told her to do, and so Ruth did it. She went and she lay at Boaz's feet, and Boaz woke up and realised that it was Ruth at his feet, and he was, I think, well, the picture shows as a lovely lady. Maybe she was a lovely lady, but Boaz was definitely interested in Ruth, and so her act in doing this meant that there was an opportunity to marry. But as in those cultures, as in that day, because Naomi had married Elimelech, there was Naomi and Ruth and Oprah and all the land and everything that fell from Elimelech usually passed down through the families. And so, although Boaz was in the family, there was actually somebody before Boaz that had the right to all of this, all of the land, all of everything, as well as Ruth, to marry Ruth. They were stood first to marry Ruth before Boaz should have had a chance. But Boaz wanted to do everything right and do everything as God wanted it. And so Boaz, after he had sent Ruth away, he went down to the gate of the city once the sun was up and once it was morning, because at the gate of the city, that is where all the business was done. That's where all things were agreed. And so he went down to the gate of the city, and there he met the man who should have been the Redeemer. He should have been the one, or he was first in line to take all of Elimelech's things and his land and his people and everything, including Ruth. And there Boaz asked if he could marry Ruth. And well, as was in the culture of that day too, they made an agreement. The man said, no, I don't want to marry Ruth and take all of Elimelech's things, so you can have her, Boaz. And to secure the agreement, do you know what they did? What's that? A shoe. A sandal. Swap sandals. That was a way of agreeing. That's what they did in those days. And so that's what happened. And the agreement was made that Boaz would be allowed to marry Ruth. So Ruth had all the heartache and had lost her first husband and decided to commit herself to Naomi. And instead of going home to her own people, she decided she would follow Naomi. And she came back into the land and she worked away in Boaz's field. And then she would marry Boaz. Well, don't know how long after they were married, but after they were married, they had a little baby. And it's amazing the fact that through Ruth and Boaz, you can trace through the generations of Jesse and David, and then you can come to the Lord Jesus Christ. And so right through the family there, in the family tree, if you plot out the family tree, you'd find out that through Ruth and Boaz and the baby, and right down, you find the Lord Jesus. So from Naomi going away into another country and having Ruth and their husbands dying and finding their way back to the country and then marrying Boaz, you can see that God's hand was in all. This wasn't all just by chance. God's hand was in it all. And so when we think of our lives, if we trust in the Lord Jesus and let God rule our lives, he can direct our paths, just like our verse. What does it say? Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. Acknowledge him and he will make straight your paths. Another version says he will direct your path. He will show you where to go and watch after you and look after you as long as you're trusting in him. There was the other man that was first. He could have taken Elimelech's things, including Ruth. He could have married Ruth. He could have redeemed her, but he didn't want to. But Boaz did, and Boaz redeemed her. Boaz married her. It's just like the Lord Jesus. He came to the cross at Calvary, and there he died, and he bore our sins, everybody's sins, the sins of the world, on the cross at Calvary, so that he could redeem us, so that he could save us. There's nobody else can do it. We've been singing about that in our songs. There's nobody else can do it, because he's the only one that didn't sin. He was the only one that went to the cross at Calvary, and that is God's plan of salvation, and that's how we can be saved. So, remember the story of Ruth, remember about Boaz, and remember that God works in really strange ways. Sometimes we saw it through Samson, we can see it through Ruth, and we can see the lineage of the Lord Jesus even through all of this, but God is in control. See you later.